Hi guys, we're taking a look at Unit 7, Skill 7, Perpendicular Bisector. Your essential question for today is how do you write the equation of the perpendicular bisector of a given line? So pause the video so that you can jot that down and then hit play when you're ready to talk about how to find that perpendicular bisector equation. So in order to write the equation of a perpendicular bisector, we need to break down this name in order to figure out what we need. Perpendicular, remember, makes 90-degree angles, but there's something special that we learned in a video or two ago about perpendicular lines. They have opposite reciprocal slopes. I'm going to try to fix up that O so it doesn't look like a awkward A. Opposite reciprocal slopes, which again means to flip and negate. So because we need slope, let's just jot down our slope formula off to the side. Slope, remember, is change y to the sky over change x. So we will probably be making a little table. Change x, change y over change x. We don't necessarily need Pythagorean theorem. The next one says bisector. So we have the word perpendicular bisectors. Perpendicular means opposite reciprocal slopes. Bisector means to cut in half. And the spot in which we cut a segment in half is at the midpoint. We learned about midpoint ways back in Skill 2. The midpoint you can either do graphically or algebraically. The algebraic formula is to add your x's, x1 plus x2, and divide it by 2. Then add your y's, y1 plus y2, and then divide by 2. You want to add them because you're averaging them. You're finding the middle of them. So in this first problem it says line segment AB has endpoints of 1, -1, and 7, -5. So we're going to write the equation of the perpendicular bisector of AB. So first off, we need perpendicular, meaning it needs to go in the opposite direction, making right angles. And you can see as I drag my little laser through here, I want to go through the midpoint and I want to make right angles. So I need to have the slope in order to find the opposite reciprocal slope. So first step is slope of AB. So again, with slope, we have to do change x, change y over change x. Y is to the sky, don't forget. And we're doing segment AB here, so that's 1, -1, and 7, -5. So I want you to find your changes, whether you do it algebraically using subtraction, or you do it graphically using the grid with your triangle down and over. Pause your video while you find your slope, and then hit play when you're ready to check your answer. So algebraically, I found -2/3 once I reduce. I could also find that graphically I go down 4 over 6. -4 over 6 reduces to -2/3 again. Second step is to find the perpendicular slope. So I have to take that slope of 2/3 and then switch and negate it, or flip and negate it. Its opposite reciprocal would be +3 over 2. So I'm definitely going to use that in a minute. The third step is to find the midpoint. So again, you can either use the formula or you can use the graph. I'm going to show you graphically because I think a lot of you are more comfortable graphically. If you use the formula, again, just stack your x values and add them, stack your y values and add them, divide both by 2. So graphically, because my change was -4 initially and +6 initially, I need to take those values and cut them in half. So I'm going to go down 2 instead and over 3 instead. That plots the midpoint at 1, 2, 3, 4, -3. So I have over 4, -3 is our midpoint. And we're going to use that to write the equation of a circle. Not of a circle, holy cow. Equation of a perpendicular bisector. So again, you would find the same thing if you did it algebraically. I'll pause the video, write it out real quick so that you can check your work. Okay, so I just did this algebraically pretty quickly for you here. You can see that I would have 8 over 2 and -6 over 2, which gives us 4, -3, which is exactly what we found up here. So now what we need to do is write an equation of a line that goes through that point and has this slope, or +3 over 2. So this is where we come back to writing equations. So it's kind of a four-step process here. Remember, your basic form is y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1, where m is slope, x1, y1 are the two values in our coordinate for the midpoint. So we have y minus -3 equals slope, which was 3 over 2, times x minus +4. And again, the x1, y1 are coming from the midpoint right here. So now I've got to simplify this because that's really ugly looking. We have y minus -3, which turns to +3, equals 3/2 times x minus 4. So that's one way to leave your equation, but say it asked you to put it in y equals, so we're going to just work through it by distributing. So we have y plus 3 equals 3/2 x minus, now 3/2 times -4 is something you can type in your calculator if you don't know how to do that math in your head. But we get -6, we take away 3, and our final answer in y equals is y equals 3/2 x minus 9. And I just want to take a second to show you what that would look like on the graph, so that you can see that it in fact is the perpendicular bisector of the given line. So if we go up to the graph and we have a y-intercept of -9, I'm going to start at -9 on the y-axis, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9 right here. And my slope says +3 over 2, so up 3 over 2, up 3 over 2, up 3 over 2, up 3 over 2. And now I have this line that you can clearly see is perpendicular to the given line, and it passes right through the midpoint, making it the perpendicular bisector. You don't always have to graph the perpendicular bisector afterwards. I was just showing you what it would look like. So on the back side, we have one more example problem that came from a Common Core exam, I believe. Line segment PQ has endpoints 5, 2, and 1, -4, which of the following represents the equation of the perpendicular bisector of PQ. So if we have the perpendicular bisector, then we need op-recip slopes, because I see the word perpendicular. And we need the bisector to go through the midpoint. So first step will be to find slope of PQ. And then second step will be to find the perpendicular slope. Okay, so take a minute to calculate that step. If you need to use the graph, then please do. Otherwise, do it algebraically using your little chart. Change x, change y over change x. Hit play when you're ready to see my work. All right, so I have my slope. I did it both algebraically and graphically in case you chose one option versus the other. Algebraically, I found +6 over 4, which gives me +3 over 2. Graphically, I had a rise of 6 and a run of 4, so again, 6 over 4 gives me 3/2. But if I want the perpendicular slope, I have to flip that upside down and negate it, giving me -2/3. So if I have a multiple choice question, that allows me to eliminate two choices immediately. I want to have a -2/3 slope, and when you remember the formula for equation of a line, this number in front of the parentheses is representing slope. So I can get rid of choices 1 and 4. I'm just going to jot down that this eliminates choice 1 and 4, and that's because of the slope. So we have the slope. Now remember, we have to go through the midpoint to write this equation. So third step is the midpoint. And again, you can do this graphically or algebraically, but I want you to pause the video while you do it so that you can try it on your own and then come back and hit play when you're ready to see me go through it. All right, so for my midpoint, I found it to be at 3, -1. And again, I did it algebraically down here at the bottom, or I did it graphically so that you could see that here. Algebraically, you have to take your x values, your y values, add them, and then divide by 2. So we ended up with 6 over 2, -2 over 2, reducing to 3, -1. And then graphically, I had a rise of 6, so I need to cut that in half, and a run of 4, which again needs to be cut in half. So now my rise is 3, and my run is 2. So now that midpoint is plotted again at 3, -1. So last but not least, we need to write the equation. That midpoint probably allows us to eliminate right away, but writing the equation is always good practice anyways. So we have y minus y1 equals m times x minus x1. You can see that the equations up top are written in this form. So once we plug everything in, we don't need to do anything as far as like distributing to get into y equals. So remember that this midpoint represents x1, y1. So when I plug in, I have y minus -1 equals our slope, which was -2/3, times x minus our x1, which was 3. Now, of course, this double negative's got to go. It becomes y plus 1 equals -2/3, parentheses, x minus 3. So this should match an equation up top. Y plus 1, -2/3, x minus 3, which is choice 3. Okay, go back and rewind if you missed something. If you're not sure how to calculate slope and midpoint, then you may need to go back to 7.1 for slope and 7.2 for midpoint. Or just go back earlier in this video. All right, let us know if you have any questions. Otherwise, get to your practice. You do need to practice this skill before moving on to the CFU. Don't cheat it. Have a good one.